Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for being here tonight for our community conversation on housing, finding common ground, and I really do hope we find some common ground tonight. I am Kathy Hunter, and I chair the Housing Committee, and we helped plan this event, and I do want to make a call out to some of our Housing Committee members. We have Mary Dean, you just want to raise your hand, Elaine Feldman, and Warner Marshall. And do we have anything else? That's it, okay. Before I introduce our special guest here, David Fink, I would like to just turn this over to Mika Cardozo, our first selectman, to say a few words.
First of all, welcome and thank you very much for coming out. We don't often get a chance to have a mutual conversation like we're trying to set up today. Generally speaking, the way the form of government we often have public comment, but that's where you folks let us know what you're thinking about, what you're feeling. We're not always in a position to let you know. So we thought trying a format where we could have just literally a conversation, particularly with somebody who's as qualified and as knowledgeable as our guest David Fink, who has been doing this for quite some time in all areas of the state with all sizes of municipalities. We thought it would be a great opportunity, and David was, believe it or not, David was gracious enough to join us for this, and this will be his, I think he's retiring after this, so this may be his last official event like this that he's doing, so we thank him very much for that. But for more than anything, thank you. I think it's important that we do communicate with one another, that we have an opportunity to understand what people are thinking, that we have an opportunity to let you know some of the information and or facts that are associated with different things and what our line of thinking might be. And David's going to help us kind of moderate that today, and we'll go from there. So thank you very much for coming, and I look forward to speaking with everybody. Kathy?
Well, I was going to introduce David Fink, but Mika kind of stole my thunder. I wanted to say, thanks, David, so much for making Woodbridge your official last gig as a housing policy consultant for the the regional, the South Central Regional Council of Government. Also, David Fink, on his resume, he was also the policy director for the Partnership for Strong Communities, and he also had a career in journalism, working with the Boston Globe, Hartford Courant, and USA Today. So, David, thanks for being here, and at this point, I'd like to turn this over to you.
Well, hello everyone. It's good to be here. Let me tell you how this is going to go, at least the beginning structure, and then I hope it goes in all sorts of different ways. We'll try to answer questions. We created a video at SCROG of affordable mixed income developments and interviewed 8 residents of them. The reason was that we thought it was necessary for people to get a better understanding of who needs income restricted units and what they look like. And the 8 residents on the video live in 5 different towns. We're only going to show you half of it. It's 20 minutes long. The link is available though, and you can watch the whole thing, but we wanted to give you a flavor of it, so we'll do that. I will ask you now, as you watch it, to take it in and afterwards ask you what impressions you have. What did you learn? Was there anything surprising? Did it raise questions? And we'll start that talking there. And then I wanted to go through about 5 minutes of key considerations that I've seen in my 22 years of housing policy work around the state and what's happening now, what other towns are doing, how they're thinking about this. And then we'll go back and forth, and I'll try to answer questions. I don't know all the answers. This is my last event. I'm supposed to be retiring. I promised my wife after tomorrow that was it. But if you have questions and I don't have the answers right away, I'll get them for you, okay? and, you know, gratis. You don't have, nobody has to pay for it. One thing I just want to say at the outset, okay, as Mika said, I've worked with a lot of towns all over the state, and I recognize, maybe even more than you do, that this is a tough issue. And the reason it's a tough issue is that we all love our towns. We live in our towns because we like those towns. That's why we have them moved. And for those of you who took behavioral psychology in college, anybody here taking it, you learn that one of the key motivators for people is a fear of loss. You don't want to lose your friends, your family, your lifestyle, your town. People like their towns the way they are, right? So the question then is, okay, you hear people saying we need more housing options in our town for more people. And immediately people think, well, that's going to drastically change the town. Well, I've seen that play out all over. And I want you to know that I am not one of the people, the housing advocates, who, when someone has a question or a concern or they're opposed right away, I don't say, oh, you're a NIMBY person. I think it is perfectly reasonable, rational, for people to have concerns about who's going to move into their town, their neighborhood, down the block. And after all of us who have purchased homes in our lives, it's probably the biggest check that most of us have ever written. And so it's not irrational for you to worry, because everything's tied up in that home, your family security, your kids' education, your retirement. So I don't think when people have concerns, and I hope people express their concerns tonight, and I hope they express their questions and we can try to answer them. I don't believe it's wrong to do that. And I believe it's great that all of you have come out and that you continue to have conversations, because towns have to figure out not only what kind of housing options they need and where they want to put them, but they have to decide, you know, best how that's going to fit into the town, what the impact is, and that only comes with conversation. So that is what we're hoping to do tonight. We're going to show you the first half of this video. Like I said, we can provide you with the link so you can go home and get a glass of wine and watch the whole thing at once if you want. But the first half will show you your flavor. And then I'll come up, and like I said, I'll ask you for your impressions or if you raise any questions. And I want to go through a few other things to talk about, and then we'll just talk. So I hope this works. I think it will. The guys running the computers and cameras seem to know what they're doing. So let's watch the first 10 minutes, and then we'll carry on.
Hello.
Make it loud.
Residents of many towns oppose the creation because they believe that developments will be insightful. Many of their surroundings. My home, they
We need to turn this light out.
we hope to clear up that.
Can you stop it from?
Yeah, I just realized this thing's not hooked up to it.
Stop and start again, maybe.
Shook the overhead.
Is there a pin on this? Because I think it's tied to this.
You guys can speak.
Yeah, because I think the speakers for this are not fired up.
Much better.
Yeah, rewind it. Dan?
I'm David Fink, the Housing Policy Consultant for the South Central Regional Council of Governments. We're here today to talk about and introduce you to affordable housing and the people who live in it. Both are misunderstood. The residents of many towns oppose the creation of affordable and mixed-income homes because they believe the developments will be unsightly, won't mesh with their surroundings, and will provide homes for people whom they believe will be bad neighbors. We hope to clear up that misunderstanding. As you'll see, the homes these folks live in are beautifully designed. As for the folks who live in them, well, they're fine people. They're workers who do important work that simply doesn't pay a lot. They're young professionals at the beginning of their careers. They're families with children and dreams. They're retirees on fixed income. They feel grateful, even lucky, to have found their homes. One said, "I'd be living in my car if I didn't find this place." And they realize, sadly, that many people think they are dangerous, or bad neighbors, or just not as good as they are. But the reality is quite different. Affordable and mixed income developments provide homes for people who we need in our communities. They're the people who cut our lawns and cut our hair, who make our lattes and care for our elderly parents, who teach our children and keep us safe. They greet us at the doctor's office and make repairs on our homes. Research, backed up by example after example, has proven that these developments don't lower neighboring property values and don't increase school enrollments. They don't increase crime, and they don't increase traffic. They are assets in their towns because they are built by reputable builders who maintain the high quality of their developments over the years, assess the qualifications of residents before renting to them, and closely watch over the living conditions. So now, let's meet some of the folks who live in affordable and mixed income developments. They are terrific people and good neighbors, and they have dreams, just like the rest of us. Craig, a successful residential and commercial realtor in Wallingford, lives in one of 10 nicely designed rental units that look like single-family homes. Adjacent to the volunteer fire department, his home meets his need for affordable housing because things weren't always going so well for him. A series of setbacks, including some painful surgeries, left him with limited income and few housing options.
This is absolutely beautiful, as you know. The builder, he builds quality structures, as you can see here. And to come across this was actually a godsend for me because where I was living previously, it was a 2-bedroom, but it was nothing like this. Folded windows, and actually, the rent was even more.
A former high school track star who ran in Milrose games at Madison Square Garden, Craig understands how personal circumstances can limit income and require affordable rentals for many people doing important work. And he rejects the stereotypes some people believe about those who need affordable housing.
There's a lot of misinformation out there, and a lot of people are led to believe whatever they read on the internet is like, oh, it must be gospel. It is not. Unless you actually speak with someone, you don't know one per person's circumstances. I don't know. People know my circumstances. I choose not to. But if they ask, and I'm a Christian man, I'll divulge that. But people have situations they fall on hard times. I personally had medical conditions that stem back for years.
Except for one neighbor who is retired, Craig's other neighbors all work, look out for each other, and he says, enjoy the peaceful surroundings. Like Craig, those in the affordable units had to provide tax documents and other information to prove they qualified under the income limits.
The quality of life here is great. Great neighbors, North Farms Fire Department. It's quiet. We're all respectful of each other's property. I've had a lot of deliveries for other people, from Amazon to here, but it is fine. It is safe, and it's enjoyable.
Craig believes his town and others should disregard the stereotypes that portray residents of affordable housing as dangerous or undesirable, and build more affordable units for the many people in Connecticut who do important work, but just don't get paid that much.
I think what they need to do is really take a look at the quality of the structures, also the application process. People have to be vetted, and more importantly too is to follow all the guidelines that have been established by either by the builder or to certain criteria established by the town. I don't think there should be information out there saying, it's affordable housing, you're gonna have this type, it's gonna attract this type of clientele. That's very, very misleading. And you can't judge a book by its cover. And I've had people in my profession, you look at them, you try to assume, but they look like millionaires, and may not be, or they look like they, flip burgers or something like that, but they're millionaires. So you can't judge a book by its cover. So you have to give every opportunity for someone to, explain to them, hey, this is the process, this is what we're building, and they need to collaborate. They need to get a think tank together and come up with a solution.
A Connecticut native, Art moved to North Carolina 5 years ago to be closer to his grandchildren when they were very young. But when he wanted to return to Connecticut 5 months ago, he found a 2-bedroom apartment would cost him close to $2,000 a month, a cost that would take more than half the modest Social Security income he earns. But a mixed-income community in Berlin with young families, workers, and many retirees like him is costing him only $1,400 a month and surrounding him with new friends.
It's wonderful. I could not believe how enjoyable it has been. The way these units are designed, and they're in these clusters that are kind of U-shaped. First of all, you can see your neighbors across a courtyard. I've met all of my neighbors. They're delightful people, most kind of my age, and we're already starting to kind of watch out for each other, which is really pretty important when you get to be past middle age.
In good health, Art is active, using facilities, even taking his neighbors' dogs for walks. He enjoys the peace and quiet.
I'm a dog lover, so I get to walk around and see everybody's pets. It's really a wonderful place to live, and I haven't heard anybody, and I've met dozens already, say anything about crime or things getting taken out of their mailbox or porch pirates. It's safe, it's very clean and well maintained, and I've enjoyed every month of my 5.
Like many affordable and mixed-income communities in Connecticut, Art's development includes a spacious, well-appointed clubhouse that all residents can use and reserve for large get-togethers. He met us there.
You could have 40 people from your family here. This thing has 4 or 5 rooms, a full kitchen, a conference area, a library.
Aware that many municipalities and their residents have resisted mixed-income communities like his, Art has advice for them. Pick a good developer and recognize that affordable developments can be well-planned, to be beautiful, safe, and well-managed.
I would encourage all town officials to visit the community I live in, which has been owned by its developer for nearly 20 years and is extremely well taken care of. A developer whose model has been duplicated throughout other towns, many of whom didn't think that these kinds of communities would be an asset and now realize they're a tremendous boon to the ongoing life of that community.
After all, he says, many millennials, Gen Xers, and downsizing older people need affordable places to live.
Let's face it, most people realize that it takes a tremendous amount or a significant amount of cash to buy a home. You need a down payment. And if you're a young person who's graduated college with a mountain of college loans to pay off, and perhaps a job that isn't paying as much as you thought it might have when you wanted to go to college, these folks are really in need of something that is, an apartment community, but in keeping with both the character of the town and the economic and social needs of the town.
Just starting his career in the hospitality industry, Valentine needed a home he could afford near his parents in Middletown and his sister, so he could help her with her children and be close to his family. His 1-bedroom duplex in a quiet mixed-income development in Berlin costs him $1,180 a month, a price he can handle because, as a front desk agent at the Foxwoods Resort, he makes a good, but still modest salary that qualifies him for an affordable unit.
So I wasn't gonna be able to pay the monthly rent on top of my car insurance and my phone bill, all that. I wasn't gonna be able to do that.
Valentine's development, with more than 70 units, is quiet and well cared for. It's run by a company that, like other Connecticut developers, carefully checks the backgrounds and credit histories of prospective tenants.
Honestly, they cut the lawn too much. They're literally on top of it. They are really, really good. So that is always top. They take care of that very well. Maintenance is really, really good. Anytime anything happens, I call them. They're here in like 2 days. No more than 2 days. They're here. Clean it up, take care of it, everything. So I never have to worry about that.
Valentine says his friends can't believe his apartment is quote-unquote affordable housing.
I'm making it happen. You know, I'm doing very well. I'm not struggling at all. You know, I'm like very comfortable with myself, surprisingly. That's why some of my friends, they look at me, they're like, bro, like, you have a decent job. You're not making crazy money, but, you know, like, you're able to, like, live in this very nice environment and just be comfortable with yourself. You're not struggling at all.
For Valentine, just starting his professional career, the chance to live in a quiet, beautifully designed community filled with families, empty nesters, workers, and retirees is an opportunity he believes many towns should provide.
Like I said, as soon as you're coming around the corner, you're like, wait, where am I going? You know, it looks more like a very nice condo-ish kind of place. So I would definitely recommend them opening more in Ephraim, because there's a lot of people out there that can definitely use this, for sure.
With several children to care.
Okay, well, like I said, that's half of it, and you can watch the other half. I think maybe you can put on the website or somewhere the link. So, impressions. Anything you saw that interested you, surprised you, edified you? Were you waving or just no?
There's a flag.
not just
Can I ask a
waving?
question?
Sure.
Can you help me understand what a mixed income development
Yeah.
is?
Yeah. They are developments where a portion, usually the largest portion of units, are market rate, priced at whatever the market will bear. And then a portion, usually a smaller portion, 10, 15, 20, sometimes 30%, are income restricted. They are restricted to people at different income levels. So for example, let's say that, I mean, in the development Valentine lived in, I think they reserved 20% of the units for people at 80% of the median income. Now, in Berlin, I'm not sure what it is, but let's say that 80% of the median income for a single person is $60,000, to show you how they determine the income. So 60,000 divided by 12 months is $5,000 a month. The way they would determine the rent is that that person doesn't have to pay more than 30% of their monthly income for rent. So 30% of $5,000 is $1,500, including utilities. So the rent would be, if that unit was reserved in a mixed income community for somebody making 80% of the median income, that person would have to pay only $1,500 for that unit. Whereas if it was available on the market might push that price up beyond his means.
David, can you speak a little bit
Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
David, when you speak, can you just speak a little closer to the mic for us?
Oh, sure, okay. One and then two.
I don't think we've taken advantage of any affordable housing in Woodbridge, and we've had some really big developments built in this town.
I mean, they haven't reserved a
They're
certain
all at
percentage of
market
units.
price.
Yeah, yeah.
Why is that? Is there a state mandate to do it, or no state mandate? Or?
There's not a state mandate, and towns are pretty much left to create the housing that they want to create. An increasing number of towns are finding, as you know, I'm sure, housing prices have risen precipitously, not just in Connecticut, all over the country. In Connecticut, just a few numbers for you. I don't want to get your head spinning with numbers, but since before the pandemic, 2019, through the end of 2023, prices rose in Connecticut, single-family home prices rose about 60%. 2024, they probably went up another 10 percentage points. So what that did, imagine, prices rising 70%, that pushed a lot of people who wanted to buy a home, but who were on the low to moderate end of the income spectrum, out of the home buying market, couldn't compete. So that pushed them into the rental market, driving up demand for rentals. So rentals during that period went up about 30%. the ripple effect continued, so people at the low end of the rental spectrum couldn't, when their rents rose, they couldn't afford it, so homelessness rose 13% 3 years ago, 3% the year after, and 13% again last year. So it's an issue of supply. Like I said, it's not just Connecticut. A lot of states are having to look at this and figure out, can we create more supply? But there's no state mandate, so we leave it to towns. And that's why it's great to have a meeting like this. Because, as I said earlier, I believe people need an opportunity to get their questions answered and to get their concerns addressed. Because it's my experience, especially having two wonderful children, that people don't hear other people, they don't listen to other people until they feel they've had an opportunity to be heard. And people need to be heard, so people need to be able to express their thoughts.
I have so many friends that tried to find smaller living facilities,
Sure.
and they were costing much more than the sale of our houses.
Yeah, that's
And
why.
so people are staying put.
And that's what leads to the
There's
rise in single-family prices, because there's not enough supply on the market. So the few homes that are on the market get bid up, and other people don't want to sell their homes because there's no place for them to go. So,
David, if I could, just before we go on to the next question, along the lines of your question again. The most recent development we have is currently underway. It's Toll Brothers. We don't have in our zoning regulations a requirement for age-restricted housing to carry an affordable component, which is how that was done without an affordable component. That's something we can and should and will look at in terms of what we can do, but that's the reason it occurred that way. I think that was along the lines of what you were asking. We also have the other development where we have some density is our Lucy Street apartments, and those do carry a 20% affordable component with deed restriction on it. So and those units in particular also come in under market in terms of the rent. So those are things that we have to adjust to and understand and modify as time goes on in order to make sure we're able to do some of the things that will alleviate the concerns.
I think it was before you came into office
Yes.
that I saw a Zoom, so it's during COVID, with a Toll Brother representative saying, you only have to ask us. We always build in 10 to 20% of our building for affordable housing, and it still didn't happen.
I did ask them before they got the second half started. So it's a little bit more than asking, but we did ask them. We did mention it, let's put it that way. And I understand, they have a
And
business
they-
model, they have a
and they
business
said
model.
no.
So they didn't say yes. What do you mean? They didn't, they're not offering to.
Couldn't you hold them up?
They're not offering to put any units up as affordable.
Couldn't you hold them up and tell them you have to?
Too late.
Yes.
Right, no, in answer to the question, the question is not to my knowledge, there's nothing that I know
It's
of that
not
we
too
can
late when there's still a
leverage.
hole in the ground.
But
No, it's all approved.
I just want to add, regarding the Toll Brothers development, creating affordable housing in that type of development takes a very complicated financial capital stack to do that. You can't just have a developer come in, have all the financing in and start building and then say, hey, can you put in a couple of affordable housing units? It doesn't work like that. Building affordable housing.
It should be built in before they even show up in town.
Right. It needs to be built into the financial structure is what I'm saying. So you can't have a developer building the housing and then after the fact ask to put in a couple affordable units. It doesn't work that way. Building affordable housing takes a long time and it's very complicated and it's a very complicated capital stack to build an affordable housing. There's just a lot of underwriting you have to do to do that. And
well, can I just add, because this gentleman really raised the right issue on mixed income housing. There are towns in the state that have created what is called an inclusionary zoning regulation. It's says, like Fairfield, for instance, says that any development of 10 or more units, 10 or more apartments, 10 or more homes, has to have at least, they had it at 12, I think they may have raised it to 15% of the units have to be income restricted, okay? Now, when you tell a developer that, developer, to Kathy's point, has to figure out, okay, can I do that? Because I'm not gonna get market rate rents on all the units. I'm gonna have to settle for less rental income on those income restricted units. And so towns have to figure out if they impose an inclusionary zoning regulation and say to the developer, you must make a certain number of units income restricted, they may deter developers from coming into their towns at all, right? Because the developer can't make enough money on the market rate units to, in effect, subsidize the income restricted units in that mixed income development, then that developer may go to another town. So you have to understand in your town what the housing market is, what the housing market will bear. Can developers do that? Now, there is a state statute that says, that allows towns to draw a separate zone where a developer could make enough money on the market rate units that he or she could also take less rental income for the income restricted units, okay? And as you know, most towns have, it's not one market for the whole town. Towns have different neighborhoods. And you might be able to do that in one neighborhood, but not in another neighborhood. So there is a statute that allows towns to create that kind of zone in a neighborhood where a developer could make enough money on 80% of the units that are market rate and get less income on the 20% of the units that are income restricted. Paul?
I didn't want to interrupt Adrian's questions.
It's quick.
Go ahead.
This may seem kind of silly, but when you say median, is that determined by the state?
Median.
Median income?
Middlemost.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But is that determined by the state? I mean,
It's,
median income in Connecticut is not the same as median income in Kansas.
the median income levels are published by HUD based on U.S. Census numbers. And they're different in different markets in the state. I think, Carol, what do we have in Connecticut? About 8 different metropolitan statistical areas? I think it's 8 different ones. The New Haven area has a Milford, New Haven area and another one. So, so it's different. You know, it tries to be sensitive. It's not perfectly sensitive, but it tries to be sensitive to the income levels in that particular area.
And the previous discussion made me, I just want to have one more question. Thank you for explaining that, because I didn't get that at all. What happened in Fairfield? Did it discourage developers?
The town of Fairfield?
Yeah.
No.
No.
No, Fairfield has created, it's probably thousands of units now, but.
So the fact that there's some affordable units in every single development, if I understand this correctly,
If it's 10 or more units.
correct, has not deterred people from not coming in and building.
Yeah, I mean, there may have been some developers, to Kathy's point, that don't have as good a relationship with their go-to lender, and they weren't able to raise the kind of pre-development and construction financing that they could do it. So it well may be that certain developers couldn't do it there, but you can do it in a fairly strong market where you don't have a lot of income restricted units and you don't have a lot of multifamily units, apartments and condos. There'll be quite a bit of demand for them, both from elderly residents who want to sell their homes and move into something smaller, or young professionals, or workers. So in Fairfield, they found that there was very strong demand.
And the demand is not what I'm questioning. What I'm what I'm asking about is the response of the developers. And
Yeah, well, my point was simply that the developers have found there was plenty of demand and they could get good rents on market rate units, and that would allow them to make some of the units income restricted. Other impressions of what we saw in the video? I'm sorry, did you ever hear that? No.
Well, I had seen this video and I saw a couple of others
Yeah, yeah.
that you were part of, and one of them brought a group of people to talk with the developers in different towns. And I think that was very compelling to me to hear how developers were able to figure out a positive outcome for themselves in mixed housing and a positive outcome for the town fathers and for the residents. So I don't know if that could be made available on the site. I thought that may answer some of the questions that I'm hearing, to hear developers, and I believe one was from Woodbridge.
Yeah, that was the tour video that we did, yeah.
Yes, but that helped fill some of the gaps,
Yeah.
because I had some of the same questions before.
I mean, that's a really important point. And groups like yours, I've been in Glastonbury, I've been in Avon, other towns in this region, have invited in developers. We have a very good developer in the room here too, who may want to jump in after this to tell you what she thinks. But it's really good for towns and residents of towns and officials in towns to know how developers work. Developers have a bad name. I won't put too fine a point on it, but a lot of towns, a lot of residents in towns think that developers are carpetbaggers. They just want to come in and build a piece of crap and take their money and go. And maybe that's happened, okay? Right? But towns have asked me, we'd like to talk to developers, and I'm aware of a bunch of developers who are very good developers, and I'll explain what I mean by that. They typically have gotten invited back to develop in the towns that they've built in already. And why? Well, they typically continue to hold their developments as their own assets and sell them off. So what does that do? It gives them an interest in not cutting corners when they build the structures, because they want them to last. And it gives them an interest in maintaining them, both indoor and outside. And finally, it gives them an interest in doing background checks on the people who rent to make sure that they can pay their rent and they're good citizens. Now, is it foolproof? No. But stuff happens in every neighborhood and every street in America, right? But these are developers who know what they're doing, and as a result, like I said, they get invited back to the town of Berlin and West Hartford and South Windsor and Avon and Brantford and a lot of places. A lot of towns are building housing. My recommendation when people in towns, residents, officials call me is I recommend certain developers. One of whom is Carol Martin, who I love very much, who's probably one of the 5 nicest people I've ever met in my life. And Carol, could you think you want to answer or add to any of what I just had to say?
Well, I just think it's important that towns do have conversations with developers prior to developers coming in and wanting to do something. Because it really needs to be a collaborative process. The developers that really want to care and add to their community or a community that they respect, they want to have that conversation. They want to hear from the leaders of the town about what the needs are. Because what's needed in Woodbridge could be terribly different than what's needed in Westport, Connecticut. So, definitely on point with that, David. It needs to be a conversation. Good developers really want to build a product that people in the community and their neighbors where they're building are going to be proud of.
And it's important to learn about how developers work, because none of us, well, maybe some of us are, but I certainly wasn't a developer. I didn't know how it worked, and I learned the rudiments, that there's the land cost and the material cost and the labor cost, and then this past couple of years I learned from developers that there's the insurance cost, which in the last year has gone up 22%. And there are issues that they have to deal with, not just with their lenders, but working with their towns. You know, and no developer wants to build a development where the fire engines can't get in, or where there are spaces where people are going to get mugged, or you know, all those other public safety things. They don't want a flood in their development. You know, so they'll work with towns. Sometimes they need help. You know, sometimes it's, you know, I've seen towns incur the cost of a road, or do the sidewalks and the street lamps, so the developer doesn't have to do that. But good developers will work with towns and have. And, you know, it is not wrong of the nice residents of Woodbridge or any other town to say, hey, we want to talk to the developers. We want to learn more about them. We want our town to, if we have properties that we all agree would be a good location for housing, we'd like to talk to a bunch of developers and see if they're interested in coming to our town. So it's really good to understand how developers work, because I think it will give you an insight into them that I think will raise their stature in the eyes of you know, of many of you. They're good people. Sir.
I'm sure this is part of how developers work. You mentioned a couple times recommending developers who have been asked back.
Right.
Who's asking them back? Because I think in this town, you already knowledge of what's usually happening is someone owns a piece of property.
Right.
And they develop it.
Right.
They bought it privately or they owned it for a long time. So who's asking them back?
Well, the towns make it clear to them if they, you know, like there's a guy, some of you may know, I know him very well, a guy named Jeff Sager, who owns Metro Realty, has done a lot of work in West Hartford, Farmington, Avon, South Windsor, Berlin. Those towns are very happy to have him back. Those towns, I think, you know, I don't know that they do this, but I would bet, you know, a fair amount of money that they let him know that certain properties are for sale and have, whether they're industrial properties that could be rezoned or, you know, old farms. And he's done a lot of work in those towns. And they're happy to have him buy those properties. And, you know, he's now a very wealthy man, but he's always made sure that he had an affordable set aside, you know, a mixed income community, always built mixed income, and he's been able to make it work. So the towns develop relationships with the developers. He did, there are a couple of developments on this video in Berlin. He did those. And so, you know, it's not a formal asking him back, but it's having a relationship and, you know, maybe being sure he knows that the old Smith Farm is going to be for sale, or this industrial property is on industrial, but we're thinking of rezoning it because we don't think any factory owner is going to want to come in there, and if you're interested in that. Mika, did you have a question?
Well, I was also going to add, I went recently to a chamber event in the Valley, and in Derby they're doing a lot of apartment type building, and one of the speakers was a builder who the town had asked because they had properties that they were looking to brownfield type arrangements and things of that nature, and as a result of their experience with the particular builder, they did indeed actually go request from that builder that they be involved in the additional project. So it was an actual example of them actually asking and inquiring about a particular developer based on the reputation and the previous work that they did.
And I might add, it's not just an industrial property or a farm, you know, a cornfield. A lot of towns are doing conversions of existing buildings. Now, sometimes you can't do that. You know, everybody says, well, it's an old mill, let's convert it. Well, the old mill, you know, may have asbestos and may have, you know, environmental problems from spills. Sometimes the footprint in the building is just not right, and the utilities, the electrical and the pipes or the plumbing are just in the wrong places, and retrofitting that kind of building is way too expensive to undertake. However, just in my town, I live in West Hartford, they just turned an old motel into 40-something units. They're turning an old synagogue into something like 68 units. They knocked down the old Children's Museum and putting in 200 units. Towns are converting schools and office buildings. Quick story, when we at SCROG helped the towns create their affordable housing plans several years ago, we had a consultant from Boston come in, and we were driving around. I was showing them the towns, and we passed one of those, you've seen them, one of those old 60s, 50s era strip malls, you know, 6, 8 stores, we've seen them, right? And half of them are vacant because, you know, time has passed them by, right? And we also know that everybody buys on Amazon now, and nobody goes to the store anymore, pretty much. And so I said to him, has anybody looked at converting these 6 or 8 stores, you know, when the leases are up on the 3 existing enterprises that are going on there, town going to these, you know, the property owners saying, hey, how about if we rezone this for multifamily housing? And by and large, they're in great locations for that because they're on a commercial strip or they're on a bus line and it's not near a neighborhood and nobody's going to freak out about it. And he says not only have they thought about it, but the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, which is the regional planning agency for the Boston area, about 100 towns did a study and found that if they just converted 10% of these old strip malls, they'd create 120,000 units of housing for the region. Right?
I've heard that that's
So,
not doable.
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I apologize. Because I mean, I've thought about that a lot. And I've heard that that's not really very, and I can't remember where I heard it from, I'm certainly no expert, but I thought I heard that was, for the reasons that you mentioned before, not an easy thing to do because of the layout and,
Well,
maybe you can respond to that. I'll just tell you what.
In the case of 6 single, you know, story, you know, stores in a strip mall, you knock it down. And,
Oh, a small one.
yeah, but we're talking about the property itself, but it's usually in a pretty good location, because like I
Okay.
said, it's on a bus line or, you know, someplace like
Okay,
that.
so
Yeah, I mean, it's problematic sometimes retrofitting an old structure, but sometimes you can do it, and office buildings, and like you said, synagogues, schools, which is service.
David, in your experience, is it all rentals? Like, are there any mechanisms or emphasis or whatever to encourage or promote or drive affordable home ownership? Instead of just, because everything I hear when we discuss affordable housing is just rentals. And that's, you don't build long-term wealth that way. And that's the reason I own a home, because I got pushed out of the apartment I was renting in Orange because they raised my rent. So
Well,
I'd like to know if you've heard of
I mean,
anything like
I
that.
think that's doable, and CHFA and the Department of Housing, there's another expert back there who knows way more than me, but just to set the table for her. The Department of Housing, CHFA, there are things called Community Developed Financial Institutions, CDFIs, that have programs to help with down payment assistance and to actually provide instruction on how to own a home, take care of a home. That's doable. I would say...
My question is more regarding like new construction. We're going to develop something.
Yeah.
New construction. Are they developed, or has there been any attempt to develop them in like a condominium type structure
Yeah,
where
there
you
has
actually
been.
own
There
a
has
home?
been, and I'll turn it over to Carla in a second. The one thing I would say, and it really goes not just to what you're talking about, people maybe getting to the point where they can own a home, whether it's a condo or a townhome or a single-family detached home, is that, and it's a good thing to think about, over the course of my life, and I would guess over the course of your lives, when you think about it, we've all lived in about 6 or 7 different places, right? Like, I get out of college and I rent an apartment with 3 or 4 other guys for a couple of years, and at some point I get tired of their dirty underwear and empty beer cans all over the place, right? So then I want to move in with one other person, right? And I do that. And then I meet my wife and we move in together for a little while. And then we scrape together enough money to buy a house. And then we live there for a while. And then we maybe buy a bigger house. And then we retire and we want to move into a condo or an apartment to downsize, right? And maybe then we want, move into an assisted living place or independent living place. Over the course of your life, over the landscape of a town, you have people at all those different stages in their lives. So depending on what you have already, and depending on the market, and depending on the topography and the demography and the geography and the politics and everything else that goes into or factors in a town, you got to figure out what you need. And then you got to figure out, well, where are we going to put it? Right? And I would guess that with all of the rental housing they were creating, the idea of affordable rental is so that you can spend only what you can afford to rent and save money. That's what most of us did. We all rented for a while, we saved enough money, and we had a down payment. So my guess is, to your point, that we're going to have increasing demand for smaller rental units. Smaller ownership units, whether they're condos or townhomes or starter homes. Remember when we used to build starter homes? I know builders now, home builders, they can't build starter homes anymore because the land cost, the material cost, the labor cost, the insurance cost too high. They need the density now to build any kind of housing. I know a bunch of former exclusively single-family home builders who are only building multifamily now. It's crazy. For 40 years they had one set of blueprints and that's what they did, and now they had to come up with another set of blueprints. So the market changes, and your point is well taken. Carla, what do you think about affordable home ownership? Carla Weil.
Yeah, so I work for one of those CDFIs. But your point about rental is clear, and the spectrum of housing is what everybody needs, and the Department of Housing recognizes that too. So they just put out, I think, $30 million in a variety of things to encourage affordable homeownership, including new construction. So they gave our organization some subsidy funds. They gave some to another organization like ours in Fairfield County to work with developers who are building affordable, essentially starter homes, not McMansions, but something that's reasonable. Sometimes if it's in a town like this, maybe with higher density than would normally be the case for affordable homes. But as I noticed in the movie, I was really impressed. Density is sometimes, that's the other bad D word besides developer. Those developments you were showing were more dense perhaps than maybe what was around them, but they still were not what you would think of as dense.
Sure.
So that's one way to make the homes more affordable. And then they also have, in addition to CHFA, which has affordable mortgages, there is now something called Time to Own, which is to try to help people who have lower incomes get into home ownership. And now there is even a program for people who purchase homes that may need some renovations, because sometimes when you buy a home it's affordable because it's not really in full repair. This program would help people get those homes up to a better situation. So just as the town needs a whole array of different kinds of housing, the state has different programs to address affordability all through that scale.
With that, at least that close to answering your question. Other questions, thoughts, or should I bring it to you? Yeah.
I'm just wondering where ADUs fit into this picture. If there were something that is like a whole cluster of ADUs that a developer could do instead of it being on individual people's property.
Well, you know, like I said, developers are coming up with all sorts of things. There's this thing called mini homes now, right?
David, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question is, accessory dwelling units, ADUs,
The apartment in the big house,
I'm sorry?
apartment in the big house.
Or apartment in the garage out back, or separate structure, or just something attached to the big house, yeah. You know, a lot of towns didn't like that, because if you bought a home in a single-family neighborhood, and you expected to look over at the next house and see 2 cars in the driveway, not 4 cars in the driveway. I mean, it was based on expectations, but, you know, they're also called granny flats, or, you know, there are other names for them. I would argue that it's one of the tiles in the mosaic of housing. I mean, there are a lot of different kinds of housing that you need, and accessory dwelling units are, you know, a good answer. They're not the answer. You need a lot of different kinds of homes because you've got a lot of different kinds of people and a lot of different, you know, circumstances.
But I was wondering, I mean, the reason I was bringing it up was I was thinking of pairing that with developers rather than the way they're typically used. Is there any way that
Well, yeah, but
building
I mean,
that type of building could
you know,
be
it's a
more-
different kind of zoning. So in the north part of Meriden, have you seen this? Carabetta is a big developer in Meriden, and they had a very small property. It might be an acre. It might even be less, but I drove by it a few months ago, and there's 8 mini houses. Right? Now, I don't know, it looked kind of like an experiment, like a pilot, but it looked great. Again, who's going to live in that? You know, not a family of 4, 1 person. Could that be an answer in certain places? Sure. You know, it really depends, and it depends very often on the infrastructure. I mean, density depends upon the, you know, on the infrastructure that's available. So, for instance, a city like San Francisco, that's, you know, 100, maybe 200 years younger than New York City, they have lower, they allow the per bedroom production of wastewater to be higher because their sewer system is better, their pipes aren't falling apart than New York. So they will allow apartments of 450 square feet, whereas not New York, although there's some apartments my daughter lived in New York, they were kind of amazing, you know, they were so because they'd been broken up and probably not legally. But the point is that you need to have a lot of different answers as people are in different circumstances, but the idea of mini houses or ADUs are, you know, part of it. Other questions before we go back? Give people a second bite of the apple? Sure.
I'm very interested in what Muffy just asked you. In that out west, if you go out to California,
Yeah.
hardly anybody builds, anybody that's at normal salary builds a single family house. They always build a house with a rental unit in it,
Yeah.
right from the get-go, because that pays the mortgage.
Yeah. Well, the town has to allow that. They have to allow 2 separate units. I'm sorry?
We do.
Yeah. Yeah, most towns, I mean, the legislature a couple of years ago passed an accessory dwelling unit statute, and towns had the choice of adopting it or adopting their own. And I don't know whether you adopted the state statute or you modified it.
We're inconsistent with the state statute.
We're aligned with the state.
Yeah. So, should I mention a few other things, or do you have other questions?
I just wanted to,
Yeah.
in the video they said something about these units not increasing the enrollment, the student enrollment
Yeah.
for the local school. Can you just explain how that works?
Sure. And this is an issue in every town. Okay. The question, the issue is about multifamily housing and number of public school-age children that live in them, because the issue comes up in most towns if you, and if I'm misstating this, please tell me, but the issue is, if you build multifamily housing, are you going to get a lot of school children that are going to become an expense in the school district? So here's the story on that. The basic research on this was done by the Blaustein School at Rutgers University in 2005. What they did was no extrapolations, no formulas. They took actual, in all 50 states, they took the actual number of school-age children, which they defined as 5 years old to 19 years old, and looked at the multifamily units and single-family units, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, multifamily units, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, single-family units, single-family homes, and looked at how many school children were produced. That came up with certain numbers, which I'll get to in a minute. The reason they have not replicated that, although Enterprise Foundation and others have done their studies, which have been consistent with what Rutgers found, is that they have seen, and Carol and Carly, you may want to jump in on that, that anecdotally, developments ever since have been consistent with what Rutgers found in their look at the census numbers. And here are the numbers, which, to my mind, and this is just my opinion, you guys believe what you want, intuitively makes sense, but you'll hear how I explain it. Rutgers found that a 1-bedroom multifamily unit in Connecticut produced 0.04 public school age children, or translation, 4 for every 100 1-bedroom units. So you think about that for a minute. How many parents are going to live with a child in a 1-bedroom unit? Not many. I've seen it one time. It happened in Fairfield, right on the Bridgeport border. It was a nurse and her daughter, and they couldn't find anything else, and so they put a bed in the living room and a bed in the bedroom.
In New York City, it happens quite a bit.
It happens quite a bit. It happens quite a bit around here.
But
Go to Merritt Avenue.
2-bedroom multifamily unit, they found 0.27 public school age children, or in other words, 1 in every 4. Again, it kind of makes sense when you think that 2-bedroom units are going to be a parent and a child, or grandma who wants a 2nd bedroom for when the grandkids come on the weekend, or 2 singles sharing, or a young couple that wants a 2nd bedroom as a study and a guest room. 3-bedroom multifamily unit, 1.38. Now you start getting a few more kids. Okay. This has been replicated, and I've told people that certain towns have looked at it, and the best look, the longest look, has been the town of Fairfield, which every year gets a report from its school department on the units that have been created and the units that exist, multifamily units, and how many public school age children in their schools come from those homes. And if anything, the reality in Fairfield is lower than the numbers that Rutgers found. Now, hold your question, okay? The question comes up in a lot of towns, and maybe I'm over-anticipating here, but I would imagine it's on their own too. Yeah, but these families will bring in more kids and they'll jam, 8 people into a 2-bedroom apartment. Okay. That's on the town to police that. Towns have zoning enforcement officers. Towns have other people. Developers get invited back to develop in towns because they police it too. So is it guaranteed, unless you have cops at the front door of every multifamily development in your town, that they won't try to put more people than you would think are allowed for occupancy? No, it's not guaranteed, but the towns can and do police that. Okay, so those are the numbers. That's what's been replicated in development after development. It's possible that people will try to jam more children in there.
Well, you're
but-
saying like things are getting worse in general, like housing costs are rising, everything is, so it might be going in that direction.
Yeah, but like I say, but towns are, like these developments, that ain't happening. But like I said, these are good developers. They manage their own properties. They're vertically integrated. Some developers will hire property managers who, as long as they get paid, maybe they don't care as much and they'll look the other way. So it's really important to get good developers who manage their own properties and maintain them. But towns do it. It's possible, and the other part of the school question, and it's a little superfluous, was off the point of your question a little bit, but UMass did this study a while ago, and school budgets are not really very sensitive to enrollment, increased enrollment, unless they have to do modular classrooms and hire more teachers or build a new school. They're sensitive to labor costs and energy costs and healthcare costs. In a lot of districts too, enrollments are falling and are projected to continue to fall through 2030.
Our school is like kind of busting at the seams.
No, I understand that, but that may not be, because I don't think that's because of multifamily housing. That's because
No.
single-family housing
Yeah.
brings a lot of school children. So, but, and like I say, I mean, Darien, their enrollment's going up too. There are some places where enrollment's going up, but it's not, and at least hasn't been shown either by the research or the anecdotal evidence because of multifamily housing. Yes?
I just want to point out that the enrollment numbers that you cite are statewide averages, correct?
Yeah, but like I said, they have been replicated in town after town after town.
Right, and so when you have an average, you've got some towns that are at the extremes, right? And so Woodbridge is an extreme in that. In the whole state, the last decade, enrollment is down 8%. Including, I actually checked West Hartford, because I know you're from West Hartford. Enrollment in West Hartford is down 7% in the last decade. In Woodbridge, it's up 15%. So there's a 23-point spread between state average and Woodbridge. We're out here.
Right.
We're not average on this measure. We might be average on some other things, but on the draw of our schools, we are not average. And so I want to just caution people about applying a state average to Woodbridge, because I do not believe that it applies.
No, you're absolutely right. My only point is that you get a lot of school kids when I believe over 90% of your housing stock is single family. Single family homes, when they turn over, families, typically younger families, move in and they have a lot of school kids. And that's why your enrollment goes up. It's not going up because you've created multifamily housing. Multifamily housing doesn't bring a lot of public school age children.
In average towns, that might be correct, but...
No, I'm saying in all towns,
No.
because...
That's not true.
What's not true?
I lived on Manila Avenue for many years. The school buses come dropping off kids on Manila and Merritt Avenue every day. So different than any other place, because there's multiple two-family houses, there's multiple apartments.
Right.
The kids coming off the bus, you'd think it was a train station.
Well, and we know that in Orange, right next to Woodbridge, that shares the regional junior high and high school system, one of the apartment complexes, we're told by officials in that town, 2 school buses every day from one apartment complex. So I just want people to be aware that these statistics may apply in an average town that has an 8% enrollment drop in the last decade, but Woodbridge is not that. And so to expect that we would have an average yield, I think is incorrect.
Monroe is going to reopen one of its schools and maybe spend about $100 million to build another floor on top of it. I mean, it's in the talks. considering it because there's a huge enrollment there too. So we're not the only town with enrollment issues.
The other issue that we have, which is different from many towns, is that we have a regional junior high and high school system, and we are charged per head. So from this year to next year, and Javi, you correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is it's about, Woodbridge has an increase of about 44 students, and the increase in our budget is $31,000 per student. And so there's not a, you don't have those kind of sunk costs in a regional district where the towns are charged based on the head count that year. And the other two towns, I believe, Orange is flat and Bethany is down. And so that makes our cost per student much higher.
The cost per student for the kids going to the high school are the same. The percentage changes based on the number of kids from each town.
Right.
So the cost is the same, it's not $30,000, it's not.
No, if you take the increase and you
But
divide it by 44,
if you-
it gets to 31,000.
It costs us more to send more kids to the school,
Right.
as one would expect it would.
Right.
Westport is one of the best school systems in the state. Westport's enrollment is flat or declining, although Westport is also one of the leaders in apartment type or density type housing. I think what David is saying is that density type housing is not what's bringing in kids. In Woodbridge, one of the reasons that we do get it is exactly what David said. The most of our stock here in Woodbridge is single family, multi-bedroom, over 3, 4, and 5 bedrooms homes is what makes up a large portion of what we have here in Woodbridge. And as a result, when people move out, you are getting kids because those are the ideal situations for people who have 2 or 3 kids. When you're talking about 1-bedroom studios and 2-bedrooms apartments, those aren't bringing in the kids. That's his point, from what I understand. So
That's true on the average. On the average, that's true. But as Joyce knows from living in the neighborhood, apartments in Woodbridge have children in them, and I just think we want to make sure that we
home apartments that are built on lots like Manila, like in the Manila neighborhood, and like our other neighborhoods that we have in Woodbridge. That's what we're talking about. Yes, that's where kids are. Nobody's denying that. I'm sorry, I see
you
a
have
question.
93% of your homes are single family, you're going to have more school kids. That's just it. Multifamily homes, I don't care what town it is, don't produce school children.
I think it's disingenuous to apply that here because the place where I used to live is in Orange. And it's the one that's being cited as when this was constructed, they made all the promises that it's not going to bring in the kids. And if you apply these numbers, 1 bedroom is 0.04, 2 bedroom is 0.27.
Right.
It's a development that has 2 separate structures. And right now, there's 2 full school buses of children leaving this development. So you can't apply those numbers. In reality, it doesn't work.
I mean, look, I think that the best thing to do would be for someone, I'll do it if you want, to talk to the Orange school system and find out, how many children they have and how many multifamily and single-family units they have in the town. But that's really the way to do it. The arithmetic.
The component there that makes a difference is how many bedrooms is it? I'm sorry, I see people over there with their hands up. So.
This is obviously an issue that comes up in every town.
Sure.
And it's normal, it's going to be different for every town, and every town is unique. There's 169 of them. But this is normal. And what bothers me is that why don't we know the answer locally? Rather than referring to a Rutgers study, why don't we know on Avalon, that's 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and Javi, 3 bedrooms. So that's important to understand that there are 3-bedroom units in that 186 unit complex. And are they little school buses or big school buses? So the real issue, what I'm saying,
Which are not 3 bedrooms.
it's not, I'm not here to debate, but why don't we know this, David? Why don't we have Orange saying, here are the addresses, here's our numbers? Why doesn't, if Orange...
They could call Mark Barnhart, who's the Community Development Director in Fairfield, and get their methodology from the school department there and apply it here. I mean, any town can do it, I mean, and you guys could do it. You know? Yes.
I wanted to go back to the video
Yeah.
because I don't, in my conversations with people and certainly for myself, it's not a
Can you speak
question
louder?
for who I have talked to and myself, it's not who's gonna move in. It's
Right.
what they're gonna move into.
Right.
And what you showed was what our survey reflects as part of our POCD process, and the CCW survey we had is what people want, which is something that fits into the character of town. That's also what the LISC person, expert who came to last community conversation of housing said that people want. And that if there is a way to build something that is way more than 12, 15, 20% affordable housing, if we work with a group like LISC, and the end result will be something that fits in to the neighborhood much better than what is being pursued right now in our town. So I really question the premise of this because I have not encountered any question about who's moving in. It's what will it look like?
Right.
What is the scale?
Right.
Whether it's compatible height, and that's where I think our town has gone gravely astray. And I think there needs to be much more effort to work with in the community for getting this right and compatible. The Lucy Street housing is an example that is very compatible with its neighborhood and with its scale. And you know, there are people who are very happy living there, and I think there are people who are very happy to have it in the town. It's an asset to the town. But that's
Yeah.
what we need to get right this time.
No, I think that again, you know, it is something that comes up, and you want it to fit the surroundings.
Yes.
And you want it to be designed properly, and that, what I was talking about earlier about working with the developer, because, you know, good developers will make modifications, and, you know, I think that's up to the town to kind of figure out, you know, do we have the right location, and do we have the right design for that location? You know, the problem is that you know, people have to be flexible about their position, because the problem is that all of us have been horrified by a lot of the post-war, multifamily housing, you know, Cabrini Green in Chicago, and Pruitt Igoe in St. Louis, Father Panic Village in Bridgeport, and, you know, badly designed and poorly maintained, and they envision, you know, cinder block and graffiti and, you know, no landscaping, and so it's important. And you know, the issue is density, because you know, developers have to divide their land cost over more units in order to afford to build the development and make it, you know, some profit. They're not going to do it for a loss. So you have to give them the density they need. You know, Mark Twain said, you know, invest in land because God's not creating anymore. You don't have to go out horizontally, you can go up vertically, but the issue is how high. Sometimes 6 stories works, sometimes 3 stories works, sometimes 4, sometimes 2. But you got to negotiate with the developer and see how we do that. And if it means not going up as high, maybe the town can help him cover some of his other costs to make the deal pencil out. You know, if he's not going to be able to put as many units on the property, then you have to work something out with him. So you know, it should be a give and take, and it is in a lot of towns. It's successful, but you know, you have every right to, you know, kind of say we'd like it to look.
I just have a question. You mentioned before that the town can control the number of people living in each unit.
Yeah.
What other leverages can the town use, or a town use, to get what they want, especially if the property is owned outright, privately?
Well, I mean, the town has to approve the construction. They have ordinances that that allow certain densities. I mean, the town doesn't have to allow anything to be built anywhere if it doesn't want to. There is as of right development though, where if it's zoned for a particular use, it can be built. But the town still has review options and can stop it from being built. Now, towns.
No, that's,
I apologize.
There's certain cities too, Hamden is doing this, Hartford has done it, where they want landlords to be licensed. So landlords who want to be licensed have to have their units inspected. And that gives the town, municipality, more leverage, because they can say, well, that unit is not in shape, or too many people in this unit. So towns have that option too. A lot of different things.
Thank you.
We're close to 8 o'clock. I didn't want to go over. Do I have one or two last questions? Yeah.
Well, I have a hypothetical question, although you may have information. In essence, what you're saying is denser housing with, say, 1 to 2 unit bedroom apartments will result in a sense, fewer children than a single-family home on the same property.
That's correct.
Are there towns that have zoned so that those types of, say, 4-unit structures can be placed anywhere in their community? Because in a sense, from what you're saying hypothetically, it would be advantageous for a town to allow that type of development everywhere, because then you would reduce the number of children in the schools while increasing your tax revenues.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are places like including Minneapolis. They got a lot of headlines a few years ago. They just got rid of zoning and here's the issue. Okay, a lot of people say, "Oh, we would like a 4 or 6 unit small apartment building." It's called missing middle housing. A lot of towns don't have it. But if a developer has to spend a lot of money for that land, he can't just put 4 or 6 units on that property, because then when he adds the labor, and materials cost and his insurance costs and everything else, he's not going to get his money back. So, that's why the density is vital to allow in most cases, especially if you want a few of those units to be income restricted. And, but it depends. It depends what's the land cost.
And well, so to that point then, it sounds like it's actually more advantageous and economically sound for developers to begin with currently undeveloped land, where there's not already a structure, you're not having to demolish anything, replace anything. If you've got unused land, that's gonna give you a head start, it sounds like, in terms of those costs.
And if you don't have sewer and water on that land, and the guy has to put a wastewater system there and extend, and drill wells, those are costs as well. So, each property is different. Whether you can put a wastewater system on a property depends on the soil quality and which way the water flows under the ground. So, I'd like to say there are rules of thumb, but there aren't. There's some general principles, involved.
Right.
I would leave you with this one last thing to think about. Okay, this year I started visiting municipal economic development commissions. Every town has one. Woodbridge has one. And here's the reason. A lot of towns cherish the commercial part of their grant list. Why? Because businesses pay taxes, and that takes some of the heat off the residential part of the grant list and the mill rate for homeowners. And they don't want the businesses to leave. But the businesses in a lot of towns are small businesses, and they operate on very tight margins, and they're having a lot of trouble filling jobs. Why? because if you hear our Department of Economic and Community Development talk about it, and the governor talk about it, there are 110,000 jobs open in the state. It used to be that Joe Blow would drive 4 or 5 towns over to take that job as a waiter, right? But now he can get that job in his hometown. So he's got to say, well, let me see, should I walk to work or should I drive 25 minutes in traffic and spend gas money for that job 5 towns on? He's staying in his town. So I'm hearing from a lot of towns that say, yeah, our merchants need labor pools. So towns are creating, or thinking about anyway, creating more multifamily housing so that they have labor pool for their businesses. Because like I said, those businesses can't afford to raise their wages to attract somebody to promote. Or the businesses are going to close or go. You know, I was in Madison a few weeks ago. I don't know if you've been to Cafe Allegre in Madison, very nice little place for lunch. They're not open for lunch on a lot of days because they can't find servers. Okay, so again, the issue is, you know, towns are creating more, a wider range of housing options because some of their longtime residents need a place to downsize. Some of their parents would like their adult children to come home and live in the town they grew up in. Some employers need workers. Most businesses need customers. Towns would like their police and firefighters and teachers to live in town. You know, there are towns now that don't have great public transportation. Their elderly residents don't want to go to a nursing home. They want to age in place at home. Well, you're going to have somebody to come into the home. If it's hard for, you know, people who are getting paid minimum wage to, you know, help elderly people get dressed and help them have, you know, get breakfast. If they can't find a car and you don't have public transportation, those people are not going to be able to age in place at home. So, you know, there are all sorts of impacts of not having a wide range of workers. And that's why I've been talking to economic development commissions. They've been inviting me, frankly. So, again, your town is your town, and it's great that you came out and you discussed this and raised some really good points. And we got to talk it over, and maybe you got to do some research. But these are problems that can be solved, and you can figure out the kinds of homes that you need and where to put them and what they ought to look like. So I'm retiring. One question. I'm gonna, you know, kind of, you know, ride off into the sunset here. But I wish you guys a lot of luck. You're really doing the right thing being here tonight and discussing it.
I just, to your point, I just didn't want to miss the point you were making, just to bring it to Woodbridge very specifically. I've gone to the social a number of times, and a number of times it's been closed. And they're odd times. So finally I did get there one time when it was open, spoke with the owner and asked him, you know, like, what are your hours? And he says it depends because we can't get the help to open on a consistent basis. I talked to Air Handling Systems, is one of our manufacturing companies in our Bradley Road Research Park, who wants to grow in Woodbridge. He's committed to Woodbridge. He wants to grow in Woodbridge. He can't get enough workers. His issue isn't what's happening and what he's selling. The issue is he can't get enough workers who live close enough, specifically because the valley has the same types of jobs and there's plenty of apartments in the valleys that these people can live in. So why, as you said, why drive 25 minutes if I can work right where my house is? I've spoken to the other restaurants once I spoke with him to see what they were experiencing. I've heard it from them as well. I've heard it from a number of the businesses that we have in our business district. We're putting a significant focus on the business district to see what we can do, to see what we can rezone so that mixed use might be an opportunity to bring in some people to be able to do these things in our town. So there's a concerted effort to do a lot more than just what we know is happening in other areas of the town as far as apartments are concerned. And it's real. People are saying this. They're asking for what can we do here in Woodbridge to bring more people closer to our town so we can get the workers we need. Our teachers are having a hard time, you know, in terms of being able to live here at this point. So these are the things we have to consider. and it goes way beyond an apartment house or apartment complex or something like that. It's just, as David said, many different solutions, whether it's ADUs or whatever it might be. It's all concerted, and we all have to do it, and we have to consider it together. I find myself in a unique situation because I'm doing too much for one group and I'm not doing enough for the other group. I find myself in the middle here where it seems like nobody's happy. And what we're trying to do is find a balance. We're trying to be moderate. We're trying to be thoughtful in terms of what we do and how we do it. And the means by which we can do that is to understand what's really important to people. Let's give our, for example, TPZ an opportunity to let the developer know that what we would like instead and see how they react. That's the type of thing we need to do. So it's important that you go out there and you say what you are saying. That's important to make sure that we give them that opportunity. So, but it is something that we have to look at more broadly than we have been looking at it, because it's a problem that we can't solve with a single silver bullet.
There's a young woman in the back who's had her hand up, and I will remember you for the rest of my life because you're the last person I'll ever recognize. What's that?
The last row.
And Mika touched upon this too. I think it's a good thing that we have healthy school enrollment. That's a really good thing for our community, and we value our schools. They are a treasure in our community, so I don't want to I don't want any kind of tone of the kids being a problem. The kids are not a problem. I think, and we love our schools, and there's so many great things happening. I think people cannot underestimate the teacher recruitment and retention problem that is on the pipeline. So I work in Westport. I think we were on a Zoom call at Team Westport almost a decade ago.
Can you rocking the Amity?
Here we go. Having hearing a similar community conversation that's going on here, so I feel like I'm replaying a lot of things that I've heard. And I'll tell you, over that time period, we have not seen a significant impact on the school community and enrollment. Obviously, the education system is functioning top-notch and doing well. And I can also say that when I'm trying to recruit and hire teachers, we're looking at paraprofessionals, we're trying to get maintainers and other staff to come and work to run our schools. When you look at this, I can map this onto a beginning teacher's salary to year 13 in Woodbridge. If you look at teachers' contracts, that doesn't even count paraprofessionals and things like that. So we looked at this exact same thing years ago in Westport, and now when we are recruiting people, there is accessible housing for people that you want to hire, so they don't have excess costs of commuting, and it's more environmentally friendly because they're able to be closer to the community. So it's just been fascinating for us to sit here in the back tonight and listen to this, because I have kind of seen this play before. Two very, very different communities with different things going on, and everyone will make their decisions here. But I do think it's important to recognize that having a strong school system is a huge asset, and we can work together to find some ways to think about how housing plays into that picture. But we also have to know that having really good teachers also requires them to be able to live close to where they work. So, and if we value that, and I think we do, then we need to make sure we have space for everybody that's part of our community if they want to live here.
Well, on that note, like I said.
I just got at Greenwich, Connecticut, about 50% of the population of students there. This was the average a few years ago, but they were children of help.
Children of
Working people in Greenwich.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's how, they survive in town. 50% of the students at the high school were children of, or, all the public schools there. They were children of, I have to look it up again to see what it is now, but it was quite high.
Well, wouldn't all the children in any school be the children of working people?
No. These low income people, they were like, housekeepers.
They were living.
Right. Because there was a market for housekeepers there, because a lot of people don't do their own vacuuming, right?
Right. So people didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all of you.
everybody for coming out tonight. I think it was a great discussion. I think a very civil dialogue, and I appreciate everybody's questions. We are going to be working on further community conversations during the summer. So if anybody has any ideas on topics that you don't want to hear more about, please contact the town so they can send that to the housing committee. And we are planning to have more of these conversations that are really needed for the town. So again, thank you everybody for showing up tonight.
They don't do it for nothing.